Yarik O'Malley sat on the examination table, rubbing his temples while an alien physician loomed over him. The creature, a tall, spindly being with bioluminescent patches along its elongated arms, adjusted the scanner hovering near Yarik's chest. The machine emitted a series of unsettling chirps before flashing a deep violet. "This is bad," the doctor announced, its voice warbling through a translator. "You have contracted galactic flu." Yarik sniffed, wiped his nose on his sleeve, and frowned. "Pretty sure it's just a cold." The doctor's glow flickered in agitation. "Your body temperature is elevated by 2 degrees. Your oxygen saturation has dropped by 6%. Your immune markers indicate a full systemic response. This is a severe infection." Yarik shrugged. I feel kind of crappy, but it's nothing serious." A second alien, shorter and stockier, with a head that resembled a smooth, translucent dome, tapped at a floating console. "Human biology is notoriously stubborn," it murmured to the first doctor. "He should be incapacitated. I'm literally just a little congested." The first doctor turned back to him with a grave expression. "You must be quarantined immediately. Galactic flu is highly contagious across multiple species. The symptoms in most beings are catastrophic. You are an anomaly." Yarik sighed. "Look, I appreciate the concern, but I really don't have time to sit in a sterile room for weeks." The shore doctor let out a low hum. "You misunderstand. We are not concerned for you. We are concerned for everyone else. You are a walking biological hazard." 2 more medics entered, both clad in sealed containment suits. One held a sterilization device, the other a containment pod. Yarik scooted back on the examination table. "All right, that seems a little excessive." The first doctor gestured to the pod. "Standard protocol." Before Yarik could argue, the medics activated the pod's field, encasing him in a soft, translucent bubble. He groaned. "This is ridiculous." "You are lucky to still be conscious," the doctor said. "Most beings experience neurological collapse within hours." Yarik pressed a hand to his forehead. "I just have a headache and some chills." The medics wheeled him out of the examination room and down a long, sterile corridor. A few passing staff members recoiled at the sight of him, their skin flush with warning colors. Yarik sighed. The quarantine unit was a spacious, featureless room with a single bed and an array of monitoring equipment. The containment bubble dissolved once he was inside, and a series of robotic arms immediately began scanning him with soft blue lights. The intercom crackled. "You will remain here until we can confirm you are no longer contagious." Yarik leaned back against the bed. "How long does that usually take?" The doctor's voice was grim. "For most species, recovery is uncertain. Many do not survive." Yarik blinked. "Yeah, but I'm not like most species." A moment of silence. Then, "We do not know." Yarik exhaled. "Great." For the next day, he was subjected to near constant monitoring. His vitals were checked every hour, his blood analyzed, his oxygen levels scrutinized. The doctors seemed baffled by his resilience, especially when he remained upright and coherent. By the second day, the fever broke. Yarik felt exhausted, but otherwise fine. He requested real food instead of the nutrient paste they insisted was optimal. The request was denied. On the third day, he started pacing the room, growing restless. The doctors were still wary, insisting that his internal systems were under immense stress. He sneezed once, and an alarm triggered outside his quarantine unit. By the 5th day, he was no longer congested. "Can I go now?" he asked, standing in front of the observation panel. The shorter doctor responded, "Your immune system has eradicated the infection. However, we must ensure there are no lingering mutations." Yarik groaned. "Mutation? It was just a flu." The first doctor appeared on the display. "A flu that has devastated entire planetary populations. Your recovery is highly unusual." Yarik rolled his shoulders. Humans get the flu all the time. We just rest, drink fluids, and wait it out." The doctors exchanged glances. The first one finally spoke again. "We need to conduct further tests." Yarik threw up his hands. "I am not a science experiment." The shorter doctor hesitated. You may be the key to a cure. That gave him pause. He sighed and sat back on the bed. Fine, but I want real food. The doctors agreed, and within an hour a tray of replicated Earth meals arrived. Yarik took one bite and frowned. This is terrible. The first doctor watched curiously. It is nutritionally identical. It tastes like regret, Yarik muttered. For the next few days they ran more tests, analyzing his immune response, his antibodies, his cellular regeneration. The results continued to baffle them. On the 10th day, the first doctor finally addressed him directly. You are no longer contagious. You may leave. Yarik stood, stretching. Finally. The doctor hesitated. Would you consider donating further samples for research? Yarik sighed. As long as I don't have to get locked up again. The doctor nodded. Agreed. As he left the quarantine unit, other staff members watched him with a mix of awe and horror. He ignored them. A nurse handed him a final report. Your resilience is remarkable. Yarik grinned. Yeah, well, we humans are stubborn. The first doctor watched him leave. That, it murmured, is an understatement. Yarik sat on the edge of a cushioned bench in the medical research wing, watching as a team of alien scientists examined a vial of his blood under an array of scanning devices. The room hummed with quiet urgency, holographic displays flickering with molecular diagrams and shifting immune markers. He'd agreed to further testing, but he was starting to regret it. A researcher with a segmented exoskeleton adjusted a control panel. Your immune response is unlike anything we have encountered, it said without looking up. The rate of viral elimination in your system is abnormal. Yarik rubbed his arm where they'd drawn blood for the 3rd time that day. Humans bounce back fast. This isn't that weird. Another scientist, a willowy figure with translucent skin, scrolled through data. You endured a pathogen that has wiped out entire species, and you exhibited only mild discomfort. We would hardly call that bouncing back. He leaned back, crossing his arms. You're making it sound like I'm some kind of genetic anomaly. I'm not. This is just how human immune systems work. The exoskeleton-clad researcher tapped at the display, bringing up an image of his white blood cells attacking viral remnants. The speed and efficiency of your immune cells are remarkable. Most species require extensive medical intervention to survive this infection. You required no treatment at all. Yarik exhaled. Look, humans get sick all the time. Our immune systems adapt. We've been dealing with viruses, bacteria, and whatever else nature throws at us for thousands of years. The translucent-skinned scientist gestured toward a floating screen. Your antibodies formed within hours of exposure. The typical response time for most species is days at minimum. Your body neutralized the virus before it could fully replicate. Yarik shrugged. That's good, right? The researchers exchanged glances. It is unprecedented, the exoskeletal one said. You were carrying a highly virulent strain, yet your body treated it as a minor inconvenience. Another scientist, a short, broad-shouldered being with dark, reflective eyes, approached with a fresh data pad. We have tested your blood against controlled samples of the virus. Your antibodies destroy it on contact. Yarik scratched his chin. That means you have a treatment now, doesn't it? The translucent-skinned scientist hesitated. If we can synthesize the necessary components, then possibly. The exoskeletal researcher folded its arms. But we do not understand why your immune system functions this way. Your species should not be able to endure such infections without severe consequences. Yarik sighed. You're overthinking this. Humans deal with sickness all the time. Some viruses are worse than others, but we've got immune systems built to handle them. The scientist with the dark eyes studied him. Your body endured a systemic infection and recovered in less than a week. That is not normal by any galactic standard. Yarik scratched the back of his neck. Maybe by your standards, but humans have had plagues, pandemics, and all sorts of nasty diseases for ages. We've built up defenses. The translucent scientist brought up another screen, displaying a time-lapsed scan of his immune system at work. Your leukocytes devoured the virus rapidly, without assistance. Even among resilient species, this level of response is unheard of. Yarik frowned. So what does that mean for your research? The exoskeletal scientist tapped a control panel. It means we must determine if your immune system can be replicated. If we can engineer similar resistance, we may be able to protect vulnerable populations. He exhaled. That sounds complicated. The dark-eyed researcher nodded. It is. Your immune system is aggressive, adaptive, and highly efficient. But we do not yet understand how universal this response is among your species. Yarik rubbed his temples. It's not just me. Most humans recover from common illnesses without medical intervention. The translucent scientist studied him. We will need more human samples for comparison. He groaned. Great! So now you need more humans? The exoskeletal one hesitated. It would be the most effective way to verify our findings. Yarik leaned forward. You're telling me that out of all the humans you've studied, none of you realize we have immune systems that can just handle this kind of thing? The scientists exchanged glances again. The dark-eyed one finally spoke. We have never observed a human undergoing a severe galactic infection before. You are the first documented case. Yarik let that sink in. So you just assumed we'd react like everyone else? The translucent researcher inclined its head. Yes. He ran a hand down his face. Well, now you know. Humans get sick, we get better, and we move on. The exoskeletal scientist adjusted a display. We need to determine if all humans share this capability, or if you are an outlier. Yarik sighed. I promise you, I'm not special. This is just how we're built. The scientist remained unconvinced. The dark-eyed researcher finally turned to him. Would you be willing to provide additional samples over time? He exhaled. Fine, but I'm not spending another week locked in quarantine. The translucent scientist nodded. Agreed. As they finalized the session, Yarik leaned back again, watching as they continued analyzing his data. He had a feeling this wasn't the last time they'd be poking at his biology. Yarik sat in the research wing's observation chamber, his arm resting on the metal table as a robotic syringe extracted another vial of blood. He was starting to feel like a walking donation center. The lead researcher, the one with the exoskeletal plating, examined the sample under a scanning device, while the translucent-skinned scientist adjusted the display. It had been nearly 2 weeks since his initial diagnosis, and aside from lingering fatigue, he felt fine. The scientists, however, seemed anything but satisfied. The dark-eyed researcher leaned over a data console. Your immune markers remain elevated. Your body is still in recovery. Yarik rolled his shoulders. That's normal. Even after a flu passes, the immune system stays on high alert for a while. The translucent-skinned scientist observed him with an unreadable expression. You are certain of this? He nodded. Yeah. After a bad illness, the immune system keeps producing antibodies for a while in case the virus comes back. That's how immunity works. The exoskeletal researcher tapped at the screen. Your body destroyed the virus entirely, yet your immune system remains hyperactive. Yarik exhaled. That's just how humans heal. It takes time for everything to settle. The dark-eyed scientist adjusted the holographic display, bringing up a new set of readings. Your energy levels remain lower than baseline. Your muscle recovery is slower than expected. He rubbed his face. I was sick. Recovery isn't instant. The translucent scientist tilted its head. You claimed you were fully recovered. He frowned. I said I felt fine. That doesn't mean I'm at full strength yet. The exoskeletal researcher folded its arms. How long does full recovery take? Yarik thought for a moment. Depends on the person. A flu can knock someone out for a week or more, and even after the fever's gone, you still feel drained for a while. Could take a few more weeks before I'm completely back to normal. The scientists exchanged glances. The dark-eyed one finally spoke. You recovered from an extreme infection faster than any known species, yet you still experience lingering effects? He nodded. That's how it works. The immune system wins the fight, but it takes time to rebuild. The exoskeletal researcher tapped the screen again. We had assumed that once the virus was eradicated, normal function would resume immediately. Yarik shook his head. Nope. Human bodies don't just snap back instantly. We need time to regain strength. The translucent scientist seemed to consider this. So your species endures illness and recovers over time. He nodded. That's the idea. The dark-eyed researcher observed him closely. You are still slightly fatigued. He exhaled. Yeah, but that's normal. I'll be fine in a few more weeks. The exoskeletal scientist adjusted the display. Your cellular regeneration is still heightened. Your immune cells continue patrolling as if the infection remains. Yarik leaned back. That's what they're supposed to do. Just because I don't have symptoms doesn't mean my body isn't still cleaning up the mess. The translucent scientist studied the readings. Your biology is highly adaptive, yet inefficient in its recovery. He raised an eyebrow. Inefficient? The exoskeletal researcher gestured at the display. Your body expended immense resources to eliminate the virus, yet it continues to operate in a heightened state. Other species recover fully once the pathogen is removed. Yarik shrugged. That's just how humans work. We push through, but it takes time to bounce back completely. The dark-eyed scientist tapped at a floating console. Fascinating. The translucent one turned to him again. You are not experiencing pain? He shook his head. Not pain, just a little drained. The scientists observed him for several more moments, before the exoskeletal researcher finally closed the scan. We will continue monitoring your recovery. Yarik rolled his eyes. Of course you will. Yarik sat on the medical observation bench, arms crossed, watching the translucent-skinned scientist review his latest test results. The exoskeletal researcher adjusted a scanning apparatus, its segmented fingers tapping rapidly against the interface. The dark-eyed scientist stood nearby, reading a holographic display with an unreadable expression. The results had come back, and as expected, they were still baffled. Yarik exhaled. So, what's the verdict this time? The translucent scientist studied the data. Your immune activity has stabilized, but your metabolic function remains slightly elevated. He stretched his legs out. Which means, the exoskeletal researcher turned to face him. Your body is still recovering. The process is slow but consistent. Yarik nodded. That tracks. It's only been a few weeks. Full recovery takes time. The translucent scientist adjusted the display. Your hydration levels fluctuate more than before the infection. Yarik shrugged. That's normal. Fevers and immune responses deplete fluids. It takes a while for everything to balance out again. The exoskeletal researcher considered this. Your circulatory efficiency has improved since our last scan. He nodded. That's what happens when the body starts rebuilding properly. The more I eat and rest, the faster things reset. The dark-eyed scientist studied him closely. You exhibit no lingering neural impairments? Yarik shook his head. No brain fog, no dizziness, just some fatigue and muscle recovery. The translucent scientist tapped a control panel. Your musculoskeletal system is regaining mass, but at a gradual rate. He rolled his shoulders. I can feel that. Strength takes time to rebuild. The exoskeletal researcher gestured to a new set of readings. Your respiratory function has returned to baseline. Yarik exhaled. Breathing feels normal again. Took a bit, but that's just part of the process. The exoskeletal researcher adjusted the scanning device. Your body has adapted to the experience. No residual anomalies detected. He stretched his arms. So, that means I'm officially cleared? The dark-eyed scientist exchanged a glance with the others before responding. Medically, yes. You may resume full activity. Yarik stood, rolling his shoulders again. Finally. The translucent scientist observed him. Your species' recovery mechanisms remain an anomaly to us. He smirked. We just call it being stubborn. The exoskeletal researcher inclined its head slightly. It is more than mere persistence. Your biology is uniquely suited to endure extreme conditions. Yarik shrugged. Guess we've had a lot of practice. The dark-eyed scientist adjusted the console, finalizing the data. Your case has provided valuable insights. We will use this information to develop more effective treatments. He nodded. Glad I could help, but next time, let's skip the quarantine bubble, yeah? The translucent scientist hesitated. We will consider alternative containment methods. Yarik sighed. Close enough. With that, he grabbed his jacket and headed for the exit. The scientists watched him go, still analyzing the results of what, to him, had just been another round with a bad flu.